Oklahoma had an unbelievably difficult 2024 season. What does Brent Venables need to do to get it rolling? And can the Sooners be a recruiting juggernaut if they do?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome back into The Portal. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime recruiting analyst and college football writer. Thank you for making The Portal your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus cash. Download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's bring him in. John Williams, Locked On Sooners. Wild year last year for Oklahoma, man. I didn't know what they were going to be. Expectations for them just depended on who you spoke with. I'm sure you had a lot of interesting, for lack of a better term, conversations with other Oklahoma fans. First off, before we dive into roster, portal recruiting, your thoughts generically overviewing it. What has the Oklahoma program got going now? What's happening?
So the 2024 season, I know people don't want to hear this, but it's an aberration year. It was a year that was decimated by injuries on the offensive side of the football.
Yes.
And inexperience. As much as we don't want to talk about injuries, we don't want to, quote unquote, make excuses for teams because of injury. It wasn't that Oklahoma just lost one or two guys at wide receiver or one or two guys along the offensive line. Like they were down to their three deep at both wide receiver and along the offensive line. And you had a very inexperienced quarterback in Jackson Arnold, somebody who I have a lot of respect for, and I believe in his talent. I believe in his ability. But when you just don't have the guys out there, I mean, it's an X's and O's game. But as you know, Brian, it's a Jimmy's and Joe's game. And Oklahoma just didn't have the Jimmy's and Joe's this season to be competitive enough on the offensive side of the ball. And as much as, listen, it was a terrible year, they were, and I hate to use this phrase, they were close in a few of those games. I mean, leading Ole Miss at halftime in Oxford. They had the big Alabama win. They were playing with LSU for much of the first half until Garrett Nussmeier came back and went Super Saiyan on the Oklahoma Sooners towards the end of the first half. And then in the second half, they had some moments where they looked like a team that, hey, this is a team that can compete. But again, the talent just wasn't there on the offensive side of the ball for them to be good enough.
I saw the Auburn-Oklahoma game, and I remember I left right before the massive comeback. I was trying to beat the crowd and go get my article done. And I walked in the door and I saw what Oklahoma did at the end. Like, it just showed how things can be wild in college football. Yep. They couldn't throw the ball a lick all game, and they hit the big play. Like, that throw was sickening. I mean, you couldn't have walked up and handed it to the receiver better. So that just shows you the ups and downs that you're trying to define in one. By the way, that was a really good recap.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah, and that play right there, and to start that Auburn game, what Michael Hawkins Jr. showed it with his speed and his running ability.
Oh, what an athlete.
And then the arm talent he showed on the dime to J.J. Hester, it shows the potential that he has. But again, he was a true freshman making a road start and then having to go play against Texas and then play against South Carolina's defensive front, which we found out was probably the best in the nation aside from maybe Ohio State. It was just a really, really difficult season offensively for Oklahoma, whether it was Jackson Arnold or Michael Hawkins, because just around those guys, there just wasn't enough talent for them to really live up to the lofty expectations that come with being an Oklahoma quarterback.
Being a freshman, I'm just going to throw this out there. No freshman should play as a starter in the Southeastern Conference. Nico didn't even do that for Tennessee. And no offense to Hawk, he's not as talented as Nico. That's not good. And of course, a certain quarterback who ironically transferred to Auburn, he's very talented too. But what were they down to? Their fifth or sixth receiver? It was insane at one point. I'm like, this is like off a computer screen, like when things go boom.
Yeah, they started the season down their top four, aside from Deion Burks, like four of their top five. They had Deion Burks for the first few games, and then he got dinged up in the Tennessee loss. And so they were down their top five guys. And then it wasn't much longer until you started losing, J.J. Hester and Brennan Thompson at the end of the season. So by the end of the season, you had lost your top seven wide receivers to injury. Along the offensive line, you lost three or four guys that you expected to start a lot of games for you in 2024. And so you're down again, like I said, to your three deep. again, nobody wants to hear the injuries reason, but it's part of the context that tells the story of the Oklahoma Sooners in 2024. You combine that with a guy that you're trying to develop at quarterback in Jackson Arnold in an offensive coordinator situation that did not seem willing to adjust to the personnel that they had. And it was just a disaster of a season offensively, but defensively, you saw the signs, you saw the vision of what Brent Venables is trying to accomplish defensively. And I think that's what gives everybody some hope for what could be in 2025, because the defense is good. The defense was ready to compete in the SEC. They just didn't have an offense that could hold up their end of the bargain.
Well, to that point, I thought the offensive talent was a little down. And then, of course, the ridiculous number of injuries. Where would you rank on a scale of 1 to 10 Oklahoma's defensive talent in 24? Where would you put it? Because I thought they were really good.
I mean, I'd probably put it like a 8 out of 10. You know, I
thought
I
had them too.
If anything they were lacking, it was cornerback play. The cornerback play was just too inconsistent.
Okay.
By the end of the season, you have a true freshman, Eli Bowen, who is a very promising player, somebody that the coaches love. He's just a little bit short in stature, and he's a true freshman out there trying to play against LSU. LSU,
not a good combination.
Known for great wide receiver play, but he had some really good moments earlier in the season and then throughout as he earned a starting role. But that was, if anywhere Oklahoma was at its weakest on defense, it was at cornerback. And it's just a position that has to develop. But they were great up front along the defensive line, had one of the best linebacker rooms in the country, led by Danny Stutzman. And then their safety group was just fantastic, and it's continuing to get better and better, led by their safety coach, Brandon Hall. So the defensive talent was really, really good. They just had an offense that was terrible.
Who's the quarterback going to be this next season?
John Mateer. So they got the Washington State transfer quarterback in John Mateer. We'll talk about him, I'm sure, when we get to the NIL discussion, but he was the big fish. And when they brought Ben Arbuckle, the offensive coordinator, over from Washington State to lead the way, I mean, that was the guy that they targeted. Number one, there was some overtures from Miami. Apparently there was overtures from Bill Belichick and North Carolina as well. But he wanted to continue to play with Ben Arbuckle, and Oklahoma made a lofty NIL deal with him. So that's part of the equation as well. But you bring in a guy that's got good experience, good demeanor, good attitude, good leadership. He can win both with his arms and with his legs. And I mean, you're banking a lot on him, but I think he's got the right mentality and the right ability to go lead Oklahoma this next year.
I knew who it was. I just wanted to see the look on your face when you said it. Because like you're an Oklahoma fan too. Mm-hmm. OU fans need hope. That dude is a dude.
He's a dude.
He is one of the best runners as a quarterback I've seen in the last several years, because he's so savvy on when to hit the jets, when to stop and make a guy go by. He'll break some tackles here and there. And he probably needs to be a little bit less fearless, to be honest with you, because Oklahoma can't afford to have him getting banged up. I don't know what all their situation is going to be on the depth chart, but I'm sure they're very inexperienced otherwise. So I'm really looking forward to him. And he is the key to something else that I'm going to be talking about with Mr. John Williams next here on the portal. What does Oklahoma have to do to get the ship righted, besides obviously Mateer, and to keep everybody staying in Norman? That is next here on the portal. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. Live betting all game long, and you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app and head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. How many games does OU have to win this next season, John? And I know this is there's just no way to avoid this. For Venables and the entire staff to stick around, what do they got to win? Minimum.
Minimum is 8. But I really feel like to allay everybody's concerns about the direction of the program, they got to get to 9 or 10. I think they've got to enter November in the playoff discussion. Now, they end the season with some big-time matchups. They'll have Alabama, Missouri, and LSU to finish the season. but they've got to be in a situation where they are in the discussion for a playoff spot when they get to November, because anything less than that, and then you enter the final 3 games of your schedule with those teams, and man, there's not going to be a lot of optimism about the future. I think they've got to get to 8 because you've got to show some improvement. Yes, you've got a difficult schedule, but I talked with Spencer McLaughlin on his Monday show, Locked On College Football, and we discussed the quarterback situation in the SEC. Whereas in 2024, Oklahoma was facing some veteran signal callers and Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart and Quinn Ewers. This next year, you're seeing a lot of quarterback turnover. And they faced Brady. They didn't face Brady Cook against Missouri, but still they were facing an experienced quarterback when they played Missouri. You're facing a lot of inexperienced quarterbacks, and that could bode well for Oklahoma, considering they're going to have one of the better defenses in the conference. If they can, steal a few of the games that they're not going to be favored in, then they're going to have a chance. But I think in order to provide some optimism about the future, you got to get to 9 or 10 wins. For Brent Venables to save his job, he's got to get him back to 8-4. And that's a crazy place to be, considering Oklahoma and the expectations that come with that program. But at some point, you got to start showing that direction. I do believe 2024 was an aberration. I don't think they're going to have as much bad luck on the injury front as they did last year.
How could they?
And so I don't think getting to 9 or 10 wins is a stretch. I think they should be able to do that, especially considering the defense that they're going to have.
They got Michigan, second game of the year. That's a unique game. And to your point, we don't really know what's going to happen at quarterback there for sure. They got a guy transferring in from Fresno that's a good player, not dominant. They also have arguably the best recruit in the country coming in to play quarterback. So Ward only knows what's going to happen, but they're going to have to face Venables' defense.
Mm-hmm.
The unique game is obviously the home game against Auburn, because your former quarterback has switched sides. And Jackson Arnold, I'm just curious, Jackson Arnold, are fans mad that he left, or what's the scenario there? Was it just circumstance and they're just kind of dust it off, don't worry about it?
Yeah, I don't think it's feeling one way or the other about it. I think a lot of people had high expectations for Jackson Arnold. He didn't live up to them. And so I think a lot of folks are okay with the exchange that occurred. I think also a lot of people understand that it wasn't all on Jackson Arnold, but a lot of it was on Jackson Arnold. He was turnover prone. He did give the ball away in some bad situations. They had 1st and goal at the 5 against Tennessee with an opportunity to really take control of that game. He fumbles it on the very next play. At the end of the Mizzou game, he's got an opportunity to go drive them and get them in, field goal position to potentially win that game. He fumbles the ball. Missouri picks it up, runs it in for a touchdown. They lose the game. So it's one of those where it's we understand. I think most people understand it wasn't all on Jackson Arnold. At the same time, the guy didn't make enough plays when the opportunities were there, and he didn't protect the football in key situations. And so you're going from a guy that had very limited experience, not really put in the best situation to have a chance to develop, and you're going to a guy in John Mateer who's got a lot of experience, albeit not at the SEC level, but someone who's shown the ability to protect the football and to make big plays, both with his legs and with his arms. So I think everybody kind of is in that place where we appreciate Jackson Arnold for what he was able to do, but also view it similarly to maybe Spencer Rattler when he left for South Carolina. Just okay, I mean, we would have liked to have you, but also we understand why you want to leave. It's no skin off our back one way or the other. I still am a big believer in his ability. I think he's got the ability. If he can get his head right, then I think things are going to get a lot better for him down the road.
Mateer, in my opinion, is the top guy in the portal, regardless position, what have you, or school. And he's a great talking point. But let's transition a little bit and talk about the recruits too. I have seen Fasusi play, and I know him a little bit. Yeah, he played with California Power 5-on-5, and my buddy runs that. That is a huge human being that can move. They had offensive line injuries. You've denoted that, John. But is there a chance for Fasusi to play in some capacity this year, or is he probably just going to be a backup?
I mean, I don't see any reason why he can't. I don't think there's anything guaranteed to anybody along the offensive line. Maybe Troy Everett at center is about it because he's one of your incumbents returning. But they've got to get better. They've got to get better significantly if they want to be a contender and compete. And if he's one of your best 5, I don't care if he's a true freshman or not, you're going to put him out there at tackle and you're just going to let him learn on the job. I don't think they can be in a position, where they can afford to sit talented guys just because they're young and inexperienced. If he is far and away better than what you've got out there, which I don't know if there's anybody out there that's better, I don't know that he's better because we just don't have any understanding of what the offensive line is going to look like. They added Derek Simmons, the Western Carolina offensive tackle, in the portal. A lot of teams were coming after him. Oklahoma was able to land him. I expect that he'll be one of your offensive tackles, but I think everything else is up for grabs. And if Fasusi can get in, learn the playbook, take care of business off the field, then he might be able to earn a spot. Is it likely? I would say less than 50% chance that it happens. But again, you know it. Everybody knows it. The talent is immense and the potential is incredible. If he can take care of all the other things, there's no reason why he can't start at some point, even if it's not early in the season.
Well, I completely agree. And I'm probably going to butcher this name, but Ryan Foje, that's another kid. They're almost identical in size. He's another kid from Texas. He's on the Louisiana border down in Bridgeland. That's another kid. It's not out of the question he could play. For those that are curious, 24/7 has Fasusi, number 8 overall in the nation. Foje, they had it 70. When you're the second best tackle in a class, you're number 7 nationally. Oh, you did pretty good. That's obvious. You also mentioned earlier, John, that cornerback was something they could use some help with. Well, they kept maybe the best player in Oklahoma at home in Tristan Haynes. Is there an expectation that he's going to play early? And what does OU need to do overall in the secondary to get better?
Yeah, I mean, at quarterback, you got to just continue to develop your guys. I mean, you added a blue chip player in Jeremiah Newcomb in the 2024 recruiting class. You added Jacoby Johnson, another blue chip player, somebody who's got a lot of potential. He's got good size. He played for you some this past season. He was a part of the 2023 recruiting class. And so you've got guys with a lot of potential and good size. You just have to continue to develop them. You had Kenai Walker and you had Des Malone that were transfer portal additions over the last few years. They played a lot of snaps for you, but they didn't elevate your defense much. And so you need guys like Jacoby Johnson to elevate his game. You need a guy like Jeremiah Newcomb to elevate his game and start taking on a significant role. If you can get a healthy Gentry Williams out there, who was a 4-star cornerback out of the Tulsa area in the 2022 cycle, the dude started the OU Texas game in 2023 with an interception to Quinn Ewers. He is a fantastic player. He's just been battling a shoulder injury for the last 2 years, hasn't been able to stay healthy. You get him healthy and get him on the field, and you've got a lot better cornerback situation than what you had in 2024. But then Malik Hawkins, the brother of Michael Hawkins, a fantastic player. A lot of size, good athleticism, a sticky corner, an NFL cornerback dad. So the legacy is there. The DNA is there for him to go and be an impactful player. And so I think if they just develop the guys that they have, they'll be in a good spot. It's just those guys got to take steps. Now, there's a lot of talk about how Oklahoma needs to go into the portal and add a veteran cornerback, maybe for some insurance. And I think that wouldn't be an unwise thing to do. At the same time, don't bring me somebody unless they're absolutely better than what you've got on your roster. I want all my first team defensive snaps going to the guys that I've got on the roster. I want to continue to develop those guys. I don't want a progress stopper at cornerback. You hear that term thrown around a lot at the NFL level. It's going to be the case in the collegiate game as well. Don't just bring me somebody just to bring me somebody. Bring me a guy if he is legitimately head and shoulders better than anybody else you have on your roster at cornerback, fine. But otherwise, let me develop these cornerback guys. As far as Ryan Foje, that's a dude that I've loved. He was a late offer. I think before his junior year, he finally got his first offer, and that came from Oklahoma. And he was an unrated prospect until maybe February of that year. And then they rate him as a 3-star. He commits to Oklahoma, and then like a week or two later becomes a 4-star. This is one of the fastest rising players in the country. He just got on everybody's radar kind of late. But I think he's got every bit the ability that Michael Fasusi has. He moves really, really well. He's got great length, great size. He's a physical player. As far as Tristan Haynes, again, it's hard to transition to the collegiate level and make an impact as a cornerback.
It is.
It's tough. So expectations to play early, I'm not going to put any of those expectations on a true freshman to play at cornerback. It's just hard, especially in the SEC when you're going to have to face Ryan Williams 1 week. And then you're going to have to face another, potential top 100 pick in the NFL draft the next week. So it's tough to break through at cornerback. That's why it was so remarkable what Eli Bowen was able to do over the second half of the season. So they've got to answer questions at cornerback, but I think they've got a lot of potential there.
When we come back, we're going to discuss the balance between transfer portal and high school recruiting with NIL here with John Williams of Locked On Sooners. That's next on the Portal. John, I know that every program has their own idea on how they should build their roster. Some teams, man, they just go after it in the portal. And I'm a little leery of that because there's always the worry about how does the NIL impact the guys on the roster. And to your point from just a moment ago, development stopper, kids get ticked off, kids leave, etc. It's tough. In your estimation from being a lifelong OU guy and covering the program, is there a balance between high school and the portal, or which way do you think OU goes?
So my lifelong OU fandom goes to 2007 when I met my wife when we were just starting dating, because I had no football affiliation whatsoever. But I think Oklahoma's trying to strike a balance. They're picking their shots. So last year in the portal, they went big on Dominic Williams, the TCU defensive tackle transfer. They added in the portal somebody that LSU wanted, Texas wanted. Oklahoma was able to land him. It was an NIL game. They made the biggest push. They also have good coaching in Todd Bates, but I mean, that was a big part of it as well. This year they go get John Mateer in the portal. They make a significant NIL offer to make sure that he doesn't get lured away by Miami or by UNC, who've got big coffers to spend from. So I think they're trying to strike a balance. Brent Venables, he prides himself on having learned from some of the best in the head coaching ranks. Bill Snyder, Bob Stoops, Dabo Sweeney. And so I think he picks and chooses from each of those guys as to what his philosophy is going to look like. Dabo was so adamant about not using the portal for several years until finally this year.
Don't get me started on that.
But I think Brent Venables, he sees the value in it, but he's going to pick and choose how they're going to use the portal. And then they're going to be kind of pick and choosy how they spend their NIL dollars. So this off season, I think they were wise. They spent at quarterback. I know we talk about the money five positions in the NFL. There are the money five in college football. It might look a little bit different, but quarterback is going to be in that discussion. And so they went and they spent heavy on the quarterback position. They weren't big spenders at the wide receiver position. They kind of went for some more under the radar prospects, guys from the FCS level, guys from the Power Five that maybe haven't had big production just yet. But I think they're going to pick their shots when it comes to the transfer portal and the NIL spot, but they're also going to play the NIL game and the recruiting. I think they want to be able to bring their guys in that they've been recruiting for 2-3 years at a time, bring them to campus and build through their recruiting classes and then supplement that through the transfer portal.
I think that's the best plan overall, just generically. Of course, every school, it's different. If you've got 17 starters that leave, you got to hit the portal,
right?
More than likely. So on that front, is OU, I mean, they had a ton of guys hurt last year. They had some guys leave, et cetera, like Jackson Arnold, but are they going to bring back enough starters where they're not going to have to really try and find a couple extra pieces right after? Because for those that don't know, there's another portal window. It's open for like 10 days, and then you sign wherever. Are they going to go after any specific spots? Is there going to be a bunch of guys or just a couple?
So in the winter portal session, they added a couple offensive tackles in Derek Simmons, the Western Carolina tackle, and then Luke Buklenko from Stanford, two veteran dudes that have a lot of snaps to their resume to add to an offensive tackle rotation that brings back everybody except for Michael Tarkin and Spencer Brown from the 2024 team. So they're bringing back guys that they expected to start for them, like Jacob Sexton and Jake Taylor, but got dinged up through the 2024 season. Both of those guys were four-star prospects out of the 2022 class, but injuries have limited their development. They bring back Logan Howland, who started for them a bunch of games at the end of the season last year. At guard, again, they bring back pretty much everybody at guard, and then they added Darius Afalava in 2025 as part of their recruiting class. And they've got Eddie Pierre-Louis, a dude I know you're very, very familiar with, who played a little bit in 2024. And the expectation is he's going to take a big jump. So offensive line, I think they've done what they're going to do. At wide receiver, they brought in 5 guys. Nobody that's a name, nobody that people are going to recognize. It's not like they brought in a Ryan Williams or Jeremiah Smith, but they brought in a couple guys from the FCS level that good size, good skills, good traits that have production at the FCS level, and they're hoping that they can turn that into somebody that does the same thing at the Power 5. And then they brought in a guy like Isaiah Satania from Arkansas, a dynamic return man that can also line up in the slot. And they brought in Josiah Martin from Cal, who was somebody that wanted to come to Oklahoma out of high school, but they just didn't have a spot for him. And so he goes to Cal. Now he's coming to Oklahoma. So they've kind of remade their wide receiver room, but they still have Deion Burks, the talented former Purdue wide receiver who transferred to them last offseason. But again, banged up, didn't really get to play. And they've got some 4-star guys in Ivan Carrion and Zion Reagans and Zion Kearney out of the 2024 class that they're expecting to continue to contribute and get better and be a part of it. Tight end is probably the spot that most people want them to go add a dynamic impact player. They added 3 guys in the portal, but nobody of significance that's going to be, again, like we talked about, a progress stopper. The hope there is Davin Mitchell, the former, he was a 5-star prospect in the 2025 class, then reclassified to 2024 to come play with Michael Hawkins. The dude's a dynamic player, just got to get everything right off the field and in the practice sessions and in the film room to be able to get on the field. So I think they've probably done everything they're going to do unless they go and find somebody like a legit starter at cornerback or a legit starter at tight end. I just don't know how much there's going to be available in the spring portal session.
That's always the question because most of the top talent has made its decision.
Yep.
Generically speaking. But to that point, John, if they could just add 1 or 2 more pieces, getting a tight end helps. I love the young running back who quite literally ran over
Alabama.
I mean, that's a horse. Running some outside, run some GT with your H back and different things like that, moving. They need to get better at tight end. But if they get quarterback play, do you think the run game, again, they've got an NFL running back that's going to be a sophomore. That's a good sign. Do you think the offense, now that they have Mateer, they're going to have RPO game? They've got obviously an offense coordinator knows what he's doing. No offense to Washington State, but they don't have the O-lineman. Like Fasusi was never going to visit Washington State.
Right.
You know what I mean? Is this an offense that can hit 30 points a game next year, even though, the schedule is not quote unquote friendly. Michigan is an out of conference game. Can they hit 30 this next year and maybe more?
I don't think 30 is unreasonable. They averaged 24 points per game this season and they were bad. And a lot of that's due to a lot of that's due to what they did in non-conference. I think if they're just marginally better, which I expect them to be much better offensively, then I think they can hit 30 points per game. And so that's why I'm slightly optimistic about what they can do as a team in 2025, because if they can get the 30 points per game and the defense can again hover around 20 to 24 points per game as a unit, then they'll be right there in the thick of an 8, 9, 10 win team. I know it sounds crazy coming off of a 6-7 season. It sounds unreasonable to have any kind of optimism at all. I'm still in this. I need to see them do it. I need to see them prove it before I'll feel 100% confident in what I believe this team can be. But an experienced quarterback, a good offensive coordinator who is part of a system of coaches whose offenses are just lighting up college football across the country right now. And you bring back a stable running back room and you've got a lot of talent on the offensive line. It's just, can they stay healthy? And I don't see any reason why they can't get to 30 points per game.
That's kind of where I'm at. If they get 1 or 2 more guys, and obviously it'd be sad if this didn't happen, get a lot more luck with injury. That was ridiculous.
Yeah.
That just can't happen to anybody. If they get those 2 things and Mateer is even 75% of what you or I think he is, OU, conservatively 7 games should be easy. I think they'll get to 8 as well. What is your prediction right now if you had to get gun to your head? What do you think the win-loss record is going to end up being for OU in 25?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be right around 8-4 right now, until I can see what the offensive line is going to look like. And that might even be optimistic based on the questions that we still have at offensive line. I think because of some of the turnover you're seeing at quarterback at a lot of the schools that Oklahoma is going to be playing, the fact that they get Michigan at home, I think that gives them a chance to go and make some noise this year. But again, they've got to get a significant jump in play and production from the offense. And a lot of that starts up front along the offensive line, because if you had a good offensive line, even with all of the wide receiver injuries you faced in 2024, you're probably a better offense. But because you don't have a good offensive line that can pass protect for the first 6-7 weeks of the season, and you don't have a wide receiver core that can get open, there's just no time for anything to happen. So And the fact that I really do think that John Mateer is going to make a significant difference. He doesn't have to go be a Heisman contender for Oklahoma to be a contender. He just has to be a much better player, a much more efficient player, and a guy that protects the football a whole lot better than Jackson Arnold did in 2024.
That's a fair statement. John, where can everybody find out everything you got going on?
Yeah, so go follow the show at Locked On Sooners at wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. You can also read my work covering the Sooners over at Sooners Wire, which is part of the USA Today Sports Network.
Appreciate you coming on the show. Everybody can follow the portal on all the same platforms that he just talked about: YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you want to go. Thank you once again. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and share this podcast. We will see you again later. Take care.